Ask an Expert. I am thrilled to be joined here tonight by Rosie Rupley, and we are covering the topic of PEMF one-on-one. And honestly, this is a topic that I'm very excited to learn a lot about. Full disclosure, in the green room, I was like, Rosie, do you call it PEMF or PEMF? And so that just gives you an idea of how much I have to learn on this topic. Rosie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. And just so everyone knows, you can call it either. There's no rules. I personally say PEMF, but either is okay.
I love that. We're very open-minded here. Well, Rosie, can you, before we kind of jump right into all of these questions that we got related to PEMF, do you mind giving us a bit of background on yourself? Where do you live? What's your kind of background? How did you get into this? Tell us more about you.
Okay, how long have we got? I'll give you the quick version. So I think a lot of people can tell already I have a bit of an accent. I'm originally from the UK, and people that know or are from the UK, I'm from Epping in Essex in the UK, which is sort of like northeast of London. I've always ridden and had horses, grown up in a equestrian background family. My mum was a rider. And then 8 years ago, I relocated with my company actually for work to the States. And I now live in Washington State. I own a Andalusian horse. He's an Andalusian cross. And he was meant to be just my fun, go for a hack, do some fun schooling with horse. And now I do eventing, dressage, and we're hoping to qualify for AECs this year. So it totally got out of control, clearly. But that gives you a bit of a vision into what I do outside of PEMF. PEMF for me is very much this aha lifestyle. The way that I actually got into it is that I have a husband who was struggling with a lot of neck pain. About 4 years ago, this was. And I had seen things about PEMF online, and I was kind of intrigued. And obviously, it's a therapy that I can use on my horse as well. So then I'm even more intrigued to try it. So I actually found another practitioner in my area, and I tried it out, and I did a horse-human combo package. So my husband got treated and my horse got treated. So I didn't get any of the therapy, but they both got the therapy, and somehow it still made my life better. My husband had all of his aches and pains taken away out of his neck, and my horse was really free moving uphill, a really joyous ride. And I just noticed all this good coming from one session. And so that after that, it was kind of history, honestly. We decided that we wanted to get into this, and into it we did.
Wow. So you saw a difference with your husband and your horse after only one session?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. I want to get more into that. Before we do, what was your process for getting certified? And really, you said like you wanted to get into it. What were the next steps that you took?
Yeah. So I like to say that I am a independent PEMF specialist, because it is not just isolated towards one brand. There's lots of brands out there, but obviously to get into it, I purchased a product, a PEMF product, and I was certified with that company. And then I really went on to do a lot of further education from there as well. I do actually have a background in equine and mammal science that I obtained when I was in the UK, and this really complemented that nicely. So when I took the certification, I kind of did this foundation on the science behind PEMF and the do's and the don'ts in application with horses, humans, and dogs, because I actually work with a lot of dogs as well. And then I have always continued to try and better myself, learn more, and just stay active in the community, because it is something that we are still learning more and more about constantly. So it's not like you can get the foundations. Don't get me wrong, you can definitely get the foundations, but I think it's something that you definitely have to stay present in, because we're always learning about PEMF and the effects that it has.
Absolutely. Okay, Rosie, let's jump into what PEMF is. What does it stand for, and kind of can you describe it to me in the science of it, as like in the most basic terms possible?
Of course, yeah. So PEMF stands for pulsed electromagnetic field. So I always say, I have one of my machines with me so I can show you, but I always say it doesn't look very natural, right? There's either these big blankets or these hoses that I'm draping over the dog or the horse, and then their body's moving and it's making like movements in the body, but it's actually a very natural therapy. So pulse electromagnetic field, all the electricity is inside of the machine. But what it's actually doing is it's creating a magnetic pulse that's entering the body. Now, what PEMF aims to do is to replicate the natural Earth's magnetic field and our body's natural magnetic field and amplify it. So we're really just taking a natural therapy and just kind of recreating it to give the body an extra boost. So what actually happens when that pulse, well, that magnetic pulse enters the body is it makes the cells of the body more permeable. When the cells of the body are more permeable, blood can flow more freely around the body, which means that you get increased blood circulation. When you get increased blood circulation, that's less stress on your heart and your body is able to function better. Now, you'll see all of this long list of outcomes that PEMF helps with arthritis, it'll help your digestive system, it'll help with performance, and the list goes on. But in totality, if your body can operate better at its best, all of those things come in turn. So what we're really aiming to do is to get as much blood circulation, having that circulation traveling at its best and at its finest, that will then usually instantly break down any inflammation that is within the body and redisperse it around the body. And that's where you get your pain relief pretty instantly. And then it will allow the body to operate at its best, usually over the next 72 hours. Does that help?
Absolutely. That was a
Okay.
great explanation.
Okay.
So you mentioned that it can come in a couple different forms. The blankets, the tubes, are
Mhm.
are those created equal, or kind of what's the different use cases?
That's a great question. Yes and no. I think they all lie with the same principles in how they are made. And you'll hear us refer to coils. So even inside of a blanket, the tubes that you might see when we lie the tubes over the horses, those tubes are created inside of the blankets as well. And so they're just in a fixed placement around the blanket to where they sit on the horse or the dog, because there's PEMF dog blankets too. And then when we have the independent loops and the coils, that's when a practitioner has to choose where they want to put the coils on a horse. So there's all of these coils that run in the same sense. And then the electrical part of the box is where all the calibration happens to create that magnetic pulse. And they pulses it out and it goes through those tubes. Now, where you get differences is in the strength. And this is where people get very confused. And rightly so. I think, honestly, some of the brands out there have not made it very easy for people to understand what's a better option when they're trying to pick something for their use case. Because it's not just about picking the best, it's about picking the best for you. And some products are not as strong as others. Sometimes companies will say, hey, we measure in hertz, and this is the hertz rate that you get. And then other companies will measure in Gauss and say, this is the Gauss rate that you get. Now, hertz is a measure of electricity, and that's how much strength is in that machine. That's really calibrating the magnetic energy. And Gauss is the output of magnetic energy. So there is differences between, so the makeup, I would say, is somewhat the same. Everyone has the same sort of principles in the coils and how it gets to the body, whether it's on a blanket or within someone's hands. But the strength within the actual machine itself does differ based on what you're buying.
Got it. Okay. And so if you're seeing those different data points and like trying to understand how to decipher them, what should you be looking for? And what is the right, like, if we use a couple of use cases as examples, what should
Mhm.
you be kind of targeting as you're looking for the different like hertz or power levels or what have you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would actually still advise that if people are really wanting to understand that for their own personal case, do seek a professional and someone that is not biased. And I mean that in the nicest way, but if you can pick somebody that does work at least with multiple brands, everyone's going to work with some brands, but at least works with multiple brands so they can help guide you, because it's going to differ based on every use case scenario. But what I can give as advice on this call is that Gauss is the true measure of how much magnetic energy is output. Now, some companies won't publish that because, one, they might know that their Gauss level is actually pretty low, or two, it actually very much depends on the settings that you input, that sort of thing. So you do want to aim for higher, I would say, but there is two types of high, because you have what we call low intensity PEMF, and then we've got high intensity PEMF. And when you have low intensity PEMF, and I'm going to give some numbers out there, and I hope that I'm staying true to the industry. It tends to be around the average range of the highest you can get in low intensity PEMF is about 70 hertz to about 50 to 60 Gauss. But then when you get into high intensity PEMF, which tends to be the handheld coils where you see the horse's body moving, you're talking about like 8500 level of Gauss. And I'm not actually even sure what the hertz that matches that actually is. So there's a big difference there. So if you're looking at blankets, you're kind of sitting in the realm of low end PEMF, but that doesn't mean you're getting less. It just means that the application is slightly different, right? Like when you've got the higher end PEMF, so high intensity PEMF, you can do one session a month and it's going to set your horse up. But when you've got maybe a lower end PEMF, you can strategically use your blankets between rides and you can still get the same outcome for your horse. And it's still just as effective. You're not always needing to pick high, but I think it really does depend on your scenario.
Got it. Okay. That was going to be kind of my next question. Is
Okay.
there different is there different use cases for high intensity versus low intensity, or as you just said, are you just using the low intensity more frequently?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the Rosie version of what I advise my clients. And this is purely out of experience in interaction with my clients and their feedback as well. So with the high intensity PEMF, I advise that if you wish to start a business, and again, it doesn't mean you have to do this, but if you're looking to start a business and become a practitioner that wants to go out there, travel to places, give sessions and solve problems, high intensity PEMF is the way to go. You need more training and you need to stay trained, would be my recommendation. Now, also, we do have big training barns. That's a thing. So I very, very frequently, I actually do recommend that, you know, if they're looking to kind of offer this service in-house, they can still do high intensity PEMF, but I still recommend that they dedicate someone from their barn to be the sole point person that's trained, because anyone can pick up these coils and put them on a horse. But if you want to get the best out of the therapy, that person does need to be trained, they need to be experienced, and they need to know what they're doing. So I would say if we really want to be professionals and be practitioners and get the most out of the therapy, high intensity PEMF, you definitely can do that. With low intensity PEMF, which normally comes in the form of a blanket, again, we're not like trading off quality here. You're still getting quality. But what's really nice that people like about the blankets is you can throw it on and walk away. As a practitioner with high intensity PEMF, you have to stand there, you have to be present, you have to watch the horse's behavior, you've got to be cognizant constantly of what you're doing to do it right and be professional. So if you've got a hustly bustly, busy training barn and you love the sound of high intensity PEMF, but you just don't have the hands and the manpower to do that, then a blanket is totally your solution. And you can still go on the higher end of the low intensity PEMF, and you can pick one of these blankets and then you can put it on, some of them have programs. So some brands will have preset programs. So it takes all the thinking power out of it. You don't have to set much up. You can start a program, you can walk away while your horse falls asleep in complete heaven. So that's why it's very attractive for people. They don't have to do so much. So I think both have their strengths and reasons for choosing them based on how you want to interact with the product. There's also a price difference as well, but that's always going to come into account. I think the main thing is that you're always picking something that is they're all expensive. So at the end of the day, the main thing is that you're picking something that's going to solve your problems.
Absolutely. That was a really clear explanation. Thank you for that,
Okay,
Rosie.
good. I was worried it was a bit much.
No, it was, I'm totally tracking what you're saying, and I think it makes perfect sense. So what are the primary benefits that horses can experience from regular PEMF treatments?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a broad question as well, because, horses of all can be pasture pets to high-end Grand Prix dressage horses to eventers. But at the end of the day, they are all going to walk away feeling good. And that is a broad statement. But when we increase the blood circulation in a horse's body, like I mentioned before, the body can operate at its best. It really benefits the gut a lot. So their gut health, that can be supported. A horse within their first session will always go through a mild detox, a positive mild detox. So it helps set their body up to function a little bit better. Their muscles might not feel sore. So if they are one of those Grand Prix dressage horses that have worked really hard, just like if we go to the gym and we're sore the next day, the PEMF is going to take the edge off of those sore muscles. So it's going to give them a little bit more back. So they're able to train more, they're able to recover more quickly. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier as well is inflammation. I can guarantee this because it's just so effective. I can guarantee this to any subject, horse, human, or dog, is that it will reduce your inflammation, which means that you do get pain reduction almost instantly. And then I'm going to add one more thing in there, and the positives are endless, but these are the key things, is arthritis. Any animal or human with arthritis, I deal with a lot of riders that have arthritis in their hands. Having PEMF just takes the edge off of the arthritis. It's not going to solve it. There is science out there saying, oh, it can break down arthritis, but at the end of the day, I've not seen anyone recover completely from arthritis and have it all reversed. But I do see everyone that has arthritis and all the horses respond positively and gain more movement and more comfortability back.
Wow, okay. And can you tell us a bit about how PEMF compares with other equine therapies such as acupuncture, massage, or chiropractic care?
Yeah, I think I don't think it competes with them. I think it complements them really nicely. I actually work personally with a massage therapist, and I just met a equine acupuncturist, which I'm super excited to work more with. And our therapies complement each other nicely. Again, with PEMF, we can really go in and loosen up those muscles by increasing that blood circulation, breaking down the inflammation. And the equine masseuse that I work with, she'll sometimes have me come in and do a once over, and she's like, I need to loosen this horse up. Can you just help me? So I would do a once over, and then she's able to get a little bit deeper into those muscles and really loosen up what she needs to. So I don't think there's a competition or a takeaway. I think that it only complements other therapies.
And is your recommendation to clients generally like, let's do this as often as as is like monetarily doable, or are you how often do you just like advise clients to be doing this?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is no. I'm not going to say that we just do it as frequently as much as you can afford, because that's still just me just taking your money. We look at every individual situation and see what's right for the horse. Now, every horse could benefit within monthly sessions, just what I call like a wellness full body refresh is what we call them. However, it's not necessary. I understand. I mean, I've got payments coming out of my ears for my lessons and everything. So what we tend to do is we tend to look at the situation. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm actually working with a horse currently that has swelling in his foot. And he seems to have a sore sole bruise underneath his foot. We're not 100% sure. He's going to be seen by a vet as well. And I think that there also might be a abscess going on. But that particular horse, for the best recovery possible, actually needs a therapy every day. And I say, okay, if you can't spend X amount of money, let's break this down. Let's see if we can do 10 minutes of the therapy every day to make it more affordable for you. And then we have other horses that might go every 3 months and have a like wellness session just to get them feeling good. So it really does vary. But again, there's not really much of a rule of thumb, but I would say for general wellness, any horse could benefit from a monthly session if it's affordable for the rider or the owner.
Yeah. With so many kind of service providers and brands out there in the market, what are some key factors that you think horse owners should be considering when choosing a PEMF service?
Yeah. I'm first of all going to touch on the blankets, and then I'll talk about the coils in hand coils. Um, think about where you live. So again, this is feedback I get from my clients. So I've learned this over the time that I've been doing the therapy. So for example, my clients in Florida that have purchased blankets through me, they have to deal with the heat. Some of the blankets are not breathable. Like when you don't want to be at a show needing to put that blanket on in 100 degrees weather, and then have your horse sweating underneath it. That is counterproductive. You should not do that. That is not going to improve your horse's well-being. So think about that, about where you live, and how frequently you might want to use the product. It's always good to be able to touch and feel. I understand that within the size of our country, you might not have fully access to somebody that has a range of products. I, for example, offer uh, web-based demos. So you can book a web demo, and so you can ask me about the materials. We can zoom in, I'll show you, and you might not be able to get your hands on it yourself, but that would be my recommendation, is have a better idea of what you're physically going to be touching and putting on the horse. Some blankets can be heavy. Like, do you have the strength, like, to throw that thing up there? So you've got to take that into account too. And any good practitioner and advisor will run through these things with you. At the end of the day, I don't want anyone coming back to me and saying, hey, I'm a little old lady with zero strength and I can't put this up here, I want to return it. That's not going to help anyone. We want to get you the right thing for you and your horse. And then when it comes to high intensity PEMF, I would just say don't go cheap. Unfortunately, there's a reason that those machines are pretty pricey. They're built very well in terms of the quality. And you're going to get the customer service back too. At the end of the day, if something goes wrong, you've invested a lot of money and you want it fixed fast. And I think there's a lot of PEMF companies popping out now. So you have to pick someone that you know has lots of recommendations and someone can tell you they've given me excellent customer service. Oh, there's actually, before you were about to say the next question, and actually there's one other thing I want to say: education. There's a lot of companies out there that don't offer education packages. So again, you can be that person if you buy something and you end up kind of blindly having it and then putting it on and thinking that you're doing the right thing, but actually you could be missing out on a lot. You could be getting more out of the therapy and the product, just because you weren't able to receive an education package.
Got it. And as far as like hiring someone like you, what are some things, what are some questions people should ask? How should they, because there's a lot, I
Mhm.
mean, there's a lot of PEMF providers, it feels like, in the market right now. How do you kind of decipher who is right for your use case?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to anyone. And for me, for my advice, it's honestly totally free. I think that people really struggle with picking the right thing for them. And I feel awful when some people come to me and they go, well, I bought this one, but it's not really good for me because and it's a lot of money. Like, I couldn't afford to keep like switching out the different products that I'm buying, and ultimately that's just not going to give you much faith in the therapy itself. You want to know what you're getting and feel confident in your purchase. I don't even know too many practitioners and advisors that will charge you too much for advice. But I think it does need to be known that people need to seek more advice. And I understand that it can be like navigating a minefield of who you're going to get, someone good or someone bad. But there are really good people out there. And to find them, I would say look at someone that even offers different services. They might not just do PEMF, they might do cryotherapy as well. It just gives a little bit more of a holistic mind of the types of people that they interact with and the types of conversations that they have. And ask for that advice. If you don't ask, you don't get. And the internet is tricky. So trying to research these things, I promise you, will probably leave you a little bit confused. So I'm bumping into more practitioners that are all more than willing to help. So definitely go out and look for one.
I love that. That is great advice. Okay, so what are some of the risks? Are there any risks associated with doing the PEMF therapy? And like, what are some signs that you should be looking out for that maybe things aren't being done correctly?
Yeah. No active bleeding. So when we're working on horses, if you've got a horse that's had an injury, if you've got legitimate blood flow coming out of the body, you do not PEMF at that point, because all you're going to do is increase the blood circulation and more blood is going to come out of the body. So rule number one, no active bleeding at any point. You can't go too wrong with PEMF, and it's one of the things that I really love about the therapy is that you can just give it a go. It's only going to give the body, horse, human, or dog, positive outcomes. But I've heard some scenarios where some people, for example, have used high intensity PEMF. They can put the machine on for like an hour and then they fall asleep. And probably the worst thing that you can do to yourself is put yourself into a high detox, which can give you like headaches and migraines. It's just a bit of overstimulation for the body, but that is not recommended by any company anyway. So you just have to be smart about it. But outside of that, you can't really go wrong. You're not going to overdo it.
Out of curiosity, how often are you doing PEMF on yourself?
Every time I have an ache and a pain. So a couple of times a week, so if I had a hard lesson and my butt muscles really hurt, you bet I am going to be sitting in front of the TV, and I'm going to sit down I've got a PEMF mat that I can sit on, and it helps so much. So I use my machine so frequently that I don't tend to need it unless I have an ache or a pain. But I'd say a couple of times a week.
That's awesome. That's really
Mm-hmm.
cool. Okay. Are there, I guess we kind of covered this, but in your mind, do you have anything to add to if there are any specific conditions or situations where PEMF is particularly effective? Or are there cases where it might not be the best choice?
Yeah. Arthritis is at the top of the list. Any type of swelling and inflammation. It's really good at helping horses with laminitis, Cushing's, those type of diseases that have really horrible symptoms that all of us just wish we could just magic away somehow. It's not going to cure it, but it's going to give your friends some relief. And I don't think there's anything that makes me more happy than seeing horses get some pain relief, especially when they're really struggling. And then performance. I tell you, like, so when I do eventing with my horse, and he's on that day 3 and he needs that little extra bump, at the end of the day, I could not do some of my competitions without just 10 minutes of PEMF giving him that extra energy boost. It's not a condition, but I really throw it in there because it's going to help them get through what they need to get through at competitions. In terms of things that you should avoid or be careful of is you do have to be careful of EPM. You do not want to be giving PEMF when there's a flare-up of EPM. So just something to be cognizant of. It can help horses with PEMF a lot to regulate their body and reduce the risk of a flare-up. But you don't want to be giving it when they're during a flare-up. And I think there's a time if they're on some certain medication shortly after a flare-up, which it can be dangerous to give PEMF because they can have another flare-up. So I would just recommend that you work closely with your vet.
Absolutely. And are horses generally like do they what's their temperament related to the treatment? Are they generally pretty like accepting of it? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite things because I have a lot of people that will say to me, oh, my horse would never do that. He's way too spooky. Like he's going to be on the other side of the barn if we did that to him. I have never had ever a horse that has not liked PEMF. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't take them a minute or two, especially mares. They're very suspicious to kind of warm up to the therapy. So often when it's their first time, I always set expectations to the owner and I'll say, oh, we're just going to give them a couple of minutes. And you can see the mares are just like looking at you like this, but they're kind of like, I want to complain about it, but it kind of feels good. And it's just one of my favorite things that every time I put a loop on the horse or the blanket on a horse, they know it's good for them and they like it. And if you've ever had PEMF done on your body, especially high intensity PEMF, it is a very weird feeling. It's very unique. It feels like it's internal within your organs. And it's surprising that these horses don't end up on the other side of the barn, but they don't. They know that it's good for them. And that's one of my favorite things about it that I feel like I'll never know the answer to, but they're very trusting. And then usually by the end of the session, they're licking, chewing. My horse, because he's an expert now, release, 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 release. And I just find that funny. And it makes you feel calm too. So it's very enjoyable to see the reactions out of horses.
Absolutely. That's definitely reassuring. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do the draping, kind of what's the science behind like what are you going
Yeah.
for? What's the objective?
Yeah, sure. So, and as a practitioner, you know what looks normal in the body, on the body of a horse, and what doesn't. So inflammation is normal for the body. So when you see that movement, some people call it twitching. It is not twitching. It is a magnetic reaction to the pulse that the body is having. That's what it actually is. But I'm looking for things that are abnormal. So as a practitioner, I know what spots are very typical for a riding horse, or an eventer or a reiner. You know, I know what I'm looking for, but I'm looking for those areas that stand out to say, that's not normal. Why in this like SI area do I have this big thumping movement going on? And that just tells me that there's probably like a buildup of inflammation there, or the muscles are extra tight. If the whole body is moving, that's fascia tightness. So we're looking for those different indicators that we would class as abnormal.
And when you see those indicators, like what's the response?
Yeah, so you just focus on those areas usually. So I have different attachments for my machine that I can use to be most effective in the area. So when we're dealing with fascia tightness, I have big coils that I can kind of drape all over the horse, and then I can put the machine a little bit lower and just let it spend some time working its magic. And you'll see the movement reduce. So I can see that it's getting better. I recently worked on a horse that had a big area of scar tissue. They weren't really sure what happened, but on the hind end, it had this big area of scar tissue and it was like concrete. And I was like, oh goodness. And I have this smaller like ping pong paddle style attachment, which actually applies the therapy differently to the coils. Because with the coils, the therapy will come out at a 360 degrees angle. And with this paddle, it comes out in a direct motion. So I use this paddle to directly go up and down the scar tissue. And I actually surprised myself. When we finished and I took the paddle away, it was almost unrecognizable. It was completely gone. So I'd already been, while I was working on it, I was talking about to the owner about how we might have to do this like in a week and maybe come back every week for 4 weeks. And then I was like, yeah, I think you're good. And I think you need to come back. So yeah, you can instantly see. And that's what I love about PEMF is that I can get some signals from the body and see when when we make a difference as well. So I can at least send the owner home with a change and a positive change.
I love that. That seems like a really great outcome for everybody. That's really cool. And it's a great segue into the next question, which is, do you have a favorite success story or example where PEMF made a significant difference in a horse's recovery or performance?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually going to tell two stories. So I'm going to answer the question directly. This is actually an example of a dog. But the animals honestly aren't too different. But I worked with this dog, and the owner rang me, and she said, "I'm really concerned. I really want you to come and do the therapy, but my dog's aggressive." And I'm not too worried about that. I said, it's okay. We can take it slow and we can just take precautions. And I've been working with this dog now once a month for 2 years. And she had very stiff joints. She's a mixed breed dog. They don't know what she is, but she definitely has some sort of hip arthritis and arthritis in the different joints. And actually, over the years, she has stopped being aggressive completely. And I think we're at the point of, it must be a year on now, and the owner can actually let people come in and not warn them. And she was telling me this story how she had a dinner party and this lady was on the floor hugging her dog, which she would have, I mean, that person would have had a bite to the face before. And this dog now lives very happily. And when my car turns up at the door, she is bouncing at the window, waiting for her therapy. And I just love that. Like, that is life changing for owner and for animal. So it's not a horse example, because I see horse examples every day, but that to me was one of my favorite examples of a change it made. And then I'm going to tell another story because I wanted to share it on this podcast, because I don't think this gets spoken about enough when people talk about PEMF, because it really does demonstrate how well PEMF works for all life cycles, or for all life forms. So PEMF actually was utilized by NASA. And NASA are one of the first people to create PEMF machines and products, and then obviously everyone else got on board. But what their issue is that they were sending astronauts into space and they were getting sick, and they couldn't figure out why. Eventually, because they're NASA, they figured out why, and it was because the astronauts were getting disconnected from Earth's magnetic field, and it was messing with their body. So their body couldn't regulate its own because every life form has a magnetic field of their own, but without Earth's magnetic field, it couldn't regulate correctly. So they created a machine with the loops. That's what they had, and they would send it to space with the astronauts, and they would use it, and they stopped getting sick, and their bodies were able to regulate. And I think it just shows how natural and how necessary the therapy is and effective it is in just standard functioning of a body. So I wanted to share that one today, because that one to me, it is something I share with a lot of my clients, and it just helps people to understand how well it actually works.
Both those stories are so cool, like in totally different ways, but like so awesome. And
Yeah.
man, it's very inspiring. That's really cool. Okay, so what kind of timeline? I mean, you kind of said it could happen in one session, but in most
Mhm.
cases, what kind of timeline should horse owners expect before noticing improvements from therapy?
Yeah, so it does depend on what sort of improvements we're looking for. I mean, I can't turn you into a Grand Prix performer overnight, and there's a little bit more that goes into that. But I always tell everyone, within your first session, you should see an improvement. Like I would say 95% of people will see an improvement. There are some people that say to me, hey, I didn't really feel much of a change. They're also the people that they didn't really have much to change already. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I would say 95% of the time, you'll always see some form of improvement. It could be in mindset, it could be in energy levels, it could be in movement of the joints. You'll always see that within the first session.
Amazing. That you don't hear that much when you talk about like alternative therapies like this. That's really amazing.
And I'm just going to throw something else on there, because something else I do advise my clients is that actually the first session you can see the biggest effect because it's new to the body. The body's like, wow, I feel great. I mean, when I work on people for the first time, sometimes they get up and start doing like dance moves and stuff like that. It's about like this aha moment for your body as well. And so I then warn them, I say, just so you know, like you will still can see continued results when you come back, but you might not quite get the big boom moment that you had in your first session, because then sometimes people seek that every session. So that's just something to be cognizant of.
Yeah, that's a really good note. I'm glad you added that. So, how do you see the role of PEMF evolving in equine wellness over the next few years, and what innovations are on the horizon?
Yeah, I see it evolving in different forms. We have blankets today, but also blankets don't touch the entirety of the horse. I often see horses needing PEMF therapy around sort of like the breast part of the horse and in between their front legs and in the girth area. Like we don't do a lot for the girth area. When I work as a practitioner on horses, I actually make sure I take my time to get my coils underneath there, and the horses love it. We don't do a lot for that girth area of a horse, and we're like really doing our girths and cinches up real tight. So I can see the application evolving and just adding on to what's already available. So sorry, we got barking dogs.
No
I think there's a squirrel outside. So I see lots of innovations coming on the horizon. All of the dog things are pretty new as well. You might see horse boots out there as well. There is companies that are making like literal like boots that kind of look like those scoot boots that you put on your horse. Things like that are all brand new. So I think the ways that we apply the therapy, we're going to see evolve over the years. And I know for a fact that I've seen some interesting plans from some companies. So it's good to stay tuned.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to. That's really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rosie, you've really kind of like put this in terms that are so easy to understand. And I feel like I have a really good understanding of PEMF. And thank you so much for just being such a great kind of like great person at sharing your expertise. Is there anything else while we have you here, that like, any misconceptions that you want to debunk or anything else related to PEMF that you want to share?
Yeah, I think we lightly touched on it, honestly. I think a lot of people out there say that the twitching in high intensity PEMF is hurting the horse. I've heard that a lot, and that's completely inaccurate. I have nothing else to say apart from that. That's not true. It's not a convulsion. It's not a twitch. Like I said, it's a magnetic connection that's actually happening between the cells of the body and the pulse. I do believe that not everyone can make a good practitioner. Unfortunately, I do see people buying products and high intensity products, and accepting money from others and just throwing the loops on and off you go. And I think people just need to be a bit more cognizant, because there's more practitioners available out there now of who they're choosing and picking someone that's experienced and someone that's educated, just so that they're getting the most for their money. It's a bit like when you're picking a trainer, right? That is a really difficult thing to navigate. And these kind of therapies are entering that territory now. So you really want to look at experience. You want to look at the different ways that they can apply the therapy, not just the same thing for every horse. And then one of the other things as well is that if you go on the lower end of the intensity, make sure that the blankets that you're picking have well-placed coils. There are actually some blankets that don't even have coils placed along the spine of the horse. It's only down the side. So you really want to kind of ask those questions when you're speaking to different brands. And some of the lower intensity blankets also require you to have the leg cuffs if you want full body coverage. So if their level, their Hertz or Gauss level is so low that it's not powerful enough to do enough blood circulation to get around the full amount of the body, you have to get the leg cuffs in order to get true blood circulation. So those are just a few things to keep in mind when you're talking to practitioners. If you're going to book someone, make sure you're doing your research on them and they've got the education that's required. It's not really required, that's bad wording, because unfortunately, we're not required to be educated. But if you want to get the most for your money, ask them what education and what certification they have done. How long have they been doing it? I mean, everyone has to start somewhere. I get that. But just make sure that they really come to you with at least honesty and know what they're doing. And then make sure you're asking these brands about their products and really how it's going to work on your horse's body. Because there are a lot of blankets out there. I would look on social media and someone's put a ad up saying, hey, I've created my own blanket, which is great. But, just because that price point might be cheaper doesn't actually mean it's going to give your horse the best therapy. So I just think that we need to normalize being able to ask help from experts. And like I said, I understand it can be really tricky to find good people that give honest advice. But at the end of the day, they're not going to push you towards one brand. So look for those people that have multiple underneath their belt.
I love that. And with relation to making sure that your practitioner has a certification or an education, is that like a check the box situation, or are they not all created equal?
It is more of a check the box situation, unfortunately. But at least some is better than none. That's all I'll say. I'll have, so some brands offer really intensive certifications, which is great, and they're really good ones. And then some brands don't. So I've recommended clients of my own that have bought products like that to go and look online and see what sort of certification they can do. And you can get a certification for not a lot of money. I think you can get one that starts from like $50. It might not be the most thorough and the most intense, but at least it's better than something. You want someone that can take at least what they've learned and apply it in the best way to your horse, your dog, or your situation when they're receiving the therapy, versus just doing the same thing for everyone. You're always going to get a little bit of something out of it, but like we want to get the most out of everything so that you can understand the results too.
Absolutely. So Rosie, how do people follow you, contact you? What services do you offer if people want to work with you? Kind of how do people get to know you more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of stick in my lane. I stick with PEMF and I work with several different brands. I also I have a small rehabilitation and wellness room. And I do vertical vibration. I'm a big fan of the vertical vibration machines. And I also do cold laser therapy. And then outside of that, I have like an equine masseuse that I work with, and an acupuncture lady who I've met and I really, really like. So I do have my fingers in a few pies, but my main lane is PEMF. I'm on Instagram, and I'm trying to create educational videos. So when clients ask me questions, I write it down. And then when I have time, I try and do educational videos. And I also offer a lot of online demos. So I might be in Washington State, but I love speaking to you guys down in Florida. So when people book me and want to get a demo on the different blankets or the machines, I'm happy to do that. So I can pass over my handle for Instagram so that people can contact me.
Yeah, what is the handle? Just so we can say it here as well.
Yeah, so it's surge.equine.pemf.
Perfect. Well, everybody go and follow Rosie on Instagram. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of people reaching out to you to ask questions and work with you. And we just really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with us this evening.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rosie. And everybody who submitted questions, thank you so much. And have a wonderful evening, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, the live is done and the upload is done. You're
okay, good.
Perfect.
My headset was warning me like halfway through that it was about to die.